Hi, I'm Sawyer. I'm 26 years old, living in Raleigh, North Carolina. I work for Holston and Reed Solutions, a mid-sized but highly respected logistics consulting firm. I started here fresh out of college, desperate to find a job that felt like more than just a paycheck. I never expected I'd actually find it, but this company became my second home. I live in a modest apartment not far from downtown. I'm not flashy, I don't party much, and I'm not the loudest guy in the room. I just like to work hard and build a life I can be proud of. 2 years in, I've built a reputation as a reliable guy, the one people go to when something needs to be done right. My supervisor, Greg, recently gave me more responsibilities, and unofficially, I started being seen as part of the management track. I love that. I felt like I belonged. I actually like going to work. The people of Holston and Reed weren't just coworkers. They were like an extended family. We had inside jokes, celebrated birthdays with way too much cake, and genuinely cared about each other's lives. The office had this energy that made you want to show up and do your best. I know not everyone gets that at work. I never took it for granted. Our founder and CEO, Mason Holston, was somewhat of a legend, late 50s, ruthless in business, but surprisingly approachable with employees. His reputation was unmatched in the logistics world. But despite how much everyone respected him, people barely knew anything about his personal life. I had only heard whispers about his wife, Delaney. Unlike the cliché trophy wife, she was hardly ever seen. She wasn't involved in the business, didn't show up at company functions, and never posted anything flashy online. A lot of people in the office weren't even sure what she looked like. I had only seen one blurry photo in a local business magazine a year prior. From that photo and the little I'd heard, I had this image of her in my mind, elegant, understated, nothing like the over-the-top wives of other corporate giants. I had always thought she must be this rare woman who didn't chase attention, quietly beautiful. The kind of person who could walk into a room and somehow pull all the light toward her without trying, but it was just something I thought in passing. A silly thought, really. I never expected I'd ever meet her, let alone speak to her. Every year, Holston and Reed hosted a huge end-of-year party at an upscale event space downtown. It was the event. Everyone in the company looked forward to it for months. Great food open, bar DJ dancing, and a chance to relax after a demanding year. This year, the vibe was even more exciting because we'd had record-breaking profits. I remember walking into the ballroom that night wearing my only decent suit, feeling good. I spotted all the familiar faces. Greg, already by the bar, our team from procurement, taking selfies by the giant Christmas tree, even the accounting department, which never joined anything, dancing to Uptown Funk. Then I froze. Across the room, standing beside Mason, was Delaney. I didn't know it was her right away. She didn't dress like a typical CEO's wife. She wore a simple, perfectly tailored navy blue dress with minimal jewelry. Her hair fell effortlessly in soft waves over her shoulders, and yet every single person around her seemed to fade into the background. She had this presence that couldn't be explained. She looked about 10 years younger than Mason, maybe 38 or 39, graceful but approachable, radiating confidence without arrogance. And the way Mason smiled at her told me everything. This was his wife. I caught myself staring and immediately looked away. What was I thinking? She was married to the boss, totally off limits. I kept my head down and joined my friends near the bar, doing my best to shake the ridiculous daydream from my head. As the night wore on, I watched from a distance as she politely mingled, smiled, and then disappeared for most of the evening. It was as if she was used to being invisible at these things. I had no idea then that this night would change everything. At that point, it was still just admiration from afar, nothing more. I thought I'd go home, wake up the next day, and return to my normal, predictable life. I couldn't have been more wrong. The music thumped through the ballroom as the night wore on. Glasses clinked, conversations blurred into laughter, and people who rarely spoke in the office were suddenly best friends on the dance floor. It was everything a corporate holiday party should be. I had no plans to stand out. I was just a junior manager trying to blend in, sip my drink, and enjoy the atmosphere. I stood off to the side, half watching the dance floor, half checking the time. That's when I felt a light tap on my arm. I turned. Delaney Holston stood there holding a glass of white wine, smiling. "Why are you hiding over here?" she asked playfully. I froze for a second. I wasn't hiding, just taking a break. She laughed, a soft, melodic sound. Come on, Sawyer, right? You're young, handsome, and working your way up. You can't spend the party standing by the wall. My heart raced. I nodded, trying to play it cool. You're right. I guess I'm not much of a dancer. She tilted her head. I bet you're better than you think. Without waiting, she grabbed my hand and pulled me onto the dance floor. I had no idea what to do, but the music, the alcohol, and her warmth dulled my panic. We started moving to the rhythm, and to my surprise, it wasn't awkward. For the next 15 minutes, we danced. At first, it was light and fun. She teased me about my stiff shoulders. I made her laugh with my bad attempts at spinning her. Little by little, we relaxed. There was no crowd anymore, just the two of us lost in music and energy. See, you're actually pretty good, she said, her eyes locking with mine under the dim lights. I smiled, still unsure how this was happening. Maybe I just needed the right partner. Her cheeks flushed. Whether from the wine or the compliment, I wasn't sure. As the song changed, she leaned in a little closer. The scent of her perfume, subtle and soft, made my thoughts race. I knew this was dangerous. I knew I should have excused myself, but I stayed. Then it happened. As the beat slowed, she slipped her fingers around my wrist. Walk with me, she whispered. I followed, dazed. She led me through the side doors, past the crowded bar area, and down a quiet hallway that opened onto an outdoor terrace. The cold air hit me like a wake-up call. Delaney. I started confused, nervous, and maybe even a little excited. She silenced me with a gentle touch on my chest. I just wanted a break from the crowd, she said, but her tone was laced with something more. I searched her face. There was warmth, but also vulnerability. I shouldn't be here, I whispered. She took a step closer. Neither should I. Before I could say anything else, she leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't rushed or sloppy. It was soft, deliberate, and lingered just long enough to feel both wrong and perfect. Every nerve in my body lit up. I stood frozen for half a second before instinct took over and I kissed her back. When we finally pulled apart, she smiled faintly, almost sad. Let's go back before anyone notices. I couldn't speak. I just nodded. We walked back inside like nothing had happened. The music welcomed us as if nothing had changed, but everything inside me had. I spent the rest of the night replaying the moment, wondering if anyone had seen us, if Mason had been watching from some dark corner. Delaney vanished soon after we returned, probably back to her husband's side. I kept my distance, smiled through conversations, laughed at jokes I barely heard, and watched the clock until I could leave without raising suspicion. The party eventually wound down. I said my goodbyes and slipped into the cold night air, alone, my heart pounding. I had no answers, no plan, just 100 questions circling in my head. What had just happened? Why had she kissed me? What did this mean? And most of all, would I ever see her again? I didn't know then that this was only the beginning. The morning after the party was one of the worst I'd ever experienced. My head felt like it was splitting open with every beat of my pulse. The apartment smelled of stale cologne and wrinkled dress clothes. Sunlight pushed through the blinds of my tiny Raleigh apartment, slicing through my eyelids like a blade. I groaned and pulled the blanket over my head, trying to block it out. As I stumbled into the kitchen to find water and 2 aspirin, my mind sluggishly tried to piece together the chaos of the previous night. The music, the laughter, the open bar, the dancing. Then a sharp wave of panic hit me so hard I had to grip the counter. I remembered the dancing, the terrace, the kiss. Delaney. I closed my eyes, my stomach twisting in knots. The CEO's wife. What the hell had I done? I rubbed my temples, willing the memory to go away. But it was real. I could still feel the softness of her lips, still hear the words she whispered before we walked back inside. Had anyone seen us? Had Mason? Was it some elaborate setup to test my loyalty? I had worked too hard at Holston and Reed to blow them all in one stupid, reckless moment. I paced the apartment like a caged animal. I'd always been careful at work, never crossed lines, never taken unnecessary risks, and now the one person in the world I should have avoided had kissed me. Worse, I had kissed her back. I couldn't tell anyone, not Greg, not my best friend Drew, no one. This wasn't just an HR nightmare. This was career suicide. By noon, I tried to talk myself down. Maybe it was just a drunken moment. Maybe she regretted it as much as I did. Maybe she'd wake up this morning and pretend it had never happened. I could do the same. I pulled off my crumpled suit and tossed it in the laundry basket. I reached into the pockets out of habit, checking for loose change or my work badge. My fingers brushed against thick paper. I froze, pulled it out, stared. A small, expensive square of white stationery, elegant minimalist. I unfolded it slowly, hard hammering. One word in graceful cursive, Delaney, a phone number, and at the bottom a faint kiss mark in bright red lipstick. I sank onto the edge of the bed, the note shaking slightly in my hand. This wasn't a mistake. She had wanted me to find this. She had put it there. I stared at the paper as if it might burst into flames. I felt lightheaded. This couldn't be happening. It had to be some kind of joke, or a test, or a trap, or maybe it was real. I sat for what felt like an hour just staring. My phone lay on the nightstand, dark and silent, almost taunting me. I debated throwing the note away, crumpling it, tearing it to shreds, pretending this entire surreal episode had never happened. That would be the smart move, the only move. But as hard as I tried to convince myself, I couldn't forget how I felt last night, how alive I had felt, how weightless and electric it had been to dance with her, to talk to her, to feel truly seen. At around 11:30 p.m., after pacing the apartment at least 50 times, I gave up. I picked up the phone, stared at it, put it down, picked it up again. My thumb hovered over the keypad for an eternity. My heartbeat was so loud it drowned out everything else. Finally, my fingers typed the number. I pressed call before I could change my mind. One ring, two rings. Click. Hello. Her voice. I swallowed hard. It was unmistakable, soft, warm. I cleared my throat, barely trusting myself to speak. Hi, it's Sawyer. A pause, then she chuckled lightly. I was hoping you'd call. I closed my eyes, letting out the breath I'd been holding. I almost didn't, I admitted. I figured. I wasn't sure you would. How are you feeling? Like I got hit by a truck. She laughed softly. Yeah, those parties will do that to you. It was a long pause, not awkward, just heavy. I barely remember the night, I said quietly. Except for the kiss. Her voice softened even more. That was the best part. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, my mind spinning. Delaney, why? She didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was calm, honest. Because I wanted to. Because for once, I decided to do something for myself. Something reckless, maybe, but something that felt good. I shook my head, still stunned. I don't want to complicate things for you, she continued. Or for me, but I also know I'd regret it if I didn't ask you one more thing. I stared blankly at the carpet. What? Would you meet me? I froze. Where? Someplace quiet, private, just to talk. It was the most dangerous question I'd ever been asked. I knew every reason in the world why I should say no, but I also knew I wasn't going to. Okay, I whispered. Tomorrow night, she offered. Tomorrow night. We hung up. I sat motionless. The phone still pressed to my ear long after the call had ended. My apartment felt smaller, hotter. My chest tightened with the weight of what I had just agreed to. I had no plan, no strategy. I was stepping off a cliff without knowing if the parachute would open. I kept telling myself to back out, to call her and cancel. I didn't. I lay back on my bed, staring at the ceiling, my pulse still racing. I had no idea what would happen next, but deep down I knew I'd already crossed the line. The next evening felt like the longest of my life. I checked the clock every 5 minutes, pacing around my apartment like a man waiting for a sentence to be handed down. I kept telling myself I could still back out, that I could text her, say I was sick, pretend none of this had happened, but I didn't. I couldn't. At 7:00 p.m. sharp, I stepped out into the crisp North Carolina air. The city felt strangely still. I drove 15 minutes out of downtown to a small, tucked-away coffee shop called the Copper Lantern. It was the kind of place you wouldn't notice if you weren't looking for it. Dim lighting, mismatched chairs, soft jazz playing through dusty speakers. Quiet, private, exactly what she'd wanted. I sat at a small corner table staring at the door every time it opened. My nerves were shot. I barely touched the black coffee in front of me. I almost jumped out of my seat when I finally saw her. Delaney walked in wearing dark jeans, a simple beige sweater, her hair loosely pulled back. No jewelry, no designer, handbag, Nothing flashy, just Delaney, effortlessly beautiful, but so normal, she could have been anyone walking down the street. She smiled softly as she approached. I wasn't sure you'd come, she said as she slid into the seat across from me. Neither was I admitted. There was an awkward silence at first, two people sitting across from each other with 1,000 things to say and no idea how to start. Thank you, she finally said. For what? For not running, for showing up. I know this is crazy. Yeah, it is, I replied, but I had to know why. She looked down at her hands twisting a thin silver ring absent-mindedly. I wasn't planning any of this, she began. Not the party, not the dancing, definitely not the kiss. I stared at her waiting. She took a deep breath. I've been married to Mason for almost 15 years. I met him when I was barely out of college. I was young and stupid and thought marrying a powerful man would solve everything. It didn't. I thought it would make me feel secure, like I had a purpose. Instead, I felt trapped for years. Her voice was calm, not angry, just tired. Mason doesn't love me. Hasn't for a long time. He has his mistresses, and I've turned a blind eye because I didn't want the world to know how hollow my life became. I sat quietly absorbing every word. I wanted to leave more times than I can count, but I've stayed for the lifestyle, the stability. I told myself that was enough, but I've realized it's not. Her eyes met mine, full of sadness and vulnerability. Last night I wasn't drunk. I wasn't confused. I kissed you because for the first time in years I felt alive. You treated me like a person, not a possession. I could barely speak. My heart was racing again, not from fear, but from the weight of her honesty. I'm not asking for anything from you, she continued. Not a relationship, not promises. I just needed you to understand that it wasn't an accident. I needed to know I still had the courage to want something for myself. I finally found my voice. I don't know what to say. I've never thought of you as anything but untouchable perfect. I thought I was crazy for even thinking about you. She smiled weakly. I'm not perfect, Sawyer. I'm human. I just want to feel wanted. I want to feel real again. We sat in silence for a long time. The coffee shop around us went on like normal, baristas, steaming milk couples, talking quietly, someone typing on a laptop. It was surreal how ordinary everything looked, while my world tilted off its axis. I leaned forward, my voice low. So what now? She gave the faintest shrug. I don't know. I just know I don't want this to be the end. Neither do I. She smiled. For the first time since we sat down, it reached her eyes. I want to see you again, but we have to be careful. No one can know. Mason would destroy you professionally if he ever found out. I nodded slowly. I knew the risk. I understand. We agreed to meet in places no one from the company would go, secluded restaurants, quiet parks, long walks after dark. We never talked about what we were doing. We just knew we wanted to keep doing it. Over the next 2 months, our secret world grew. There were long phone calls that stretched into early mornings, stolen moments in parking lots, notes left in places only we knew. I learned everything about her favorite books, her hidden love of bad 80s movies, the fact that she always hated the color gold, but wore it because Mason liked it. I fell harder with every passing day. It wasn't just physical. It was the way she listened, the way she laughed at my dumb jokes, the way she looked at me like I was the only man in the room, and I knew she was falling too. But underneath it all, there was always a quiet ticking clock. We both knew it couldn't stay hidden forever. That one day, we'd have to face the consequences of what we were building. Still, neither of us was ready to walk away. Not yet. I had known from the beginning that this couldn't last. Every time Delaney and I met, every late-night phone call, every glance across a crowded room felt borrowed, fragile, like holding something too delicate to last. But for 2 months, we lived inside our own small world, pretending the outside didn't exist. Then one night, everything changed. We were sitting in my apartment, soft music playing from the old Bluetooth speaker I kept on my bookshelf. Delaney was curled up next to me wearing a worn gray hoodie, her hair messy and beautiful. She stared at me for a long time without speaking. Finally, she broke the silence. I can't keep living two lives, Sawyer. I sat up slightly, heart already racing at where I knew this was going. I know, I whispered. She exhaled slowly. I've already talked to my attorney. I'm filing for divorce next week. I blinked. You're serious? Serious? She nodded. Mason will be furious, but he won't be surprised. We've been living as strangers for years. I felt a surge of emotion, excitement, terror, relief, panic. I want to start over, she continued. Not just leave Mason. I want to leave everything, this city, the company, the social circles, and all of it. I stared at her, stunned. What are you saying? Delaney reached for my hand, holding it tightly between both of hers. I'm asking you to come with me. Leave the company. Walk away from this mess before it gets ugly. We'll move somewhere new, quiet, normal. We'll build something real together. I don't want a mansion. I don't want charity events. I just want you. The words hit me like a freight train. I had worked so hard to climb at Holston and Reed. I had dreamed of becoming an executive. But as I looked into her eyes, I realized none of that mattered anymore. I hadn't felt this alive, this sure of something, in my entire life. I squeezed her hand. I'm in. Her eyes watered and she smiled in that soft way that always made my heart stop. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. The next morning, I walked into my supervisor Greg's office with my resignation letter. His jaw dropped when I told him I was leaving effective immediately. I gave no reason. I didn't know anyone won. Delaney kept her word. Her divorce papers were filed that same week. Mason was blindsided, though he tried to act unaffected, but things didn't stay calm for long. Rumors spread fast at the company. Both my sudden resignation and Delaney's divorce raised eyebrows. Mason became obsessed with figuring out what had happened under his nose. He called in favors, pulled surveillance logs from the corporate building, demanded to know who she had been meeting. But that week, Holston and Reed was also hit with a major federal tax audit that consumed his focus. We had gotten out just in time. Within a month, we left Raleigh behind. We drove with no firm destination, eventually settling in a small coastal town in South Carolina. Quiet streets, friendly neighbors, long walks by the beach. We bought a modest sunlit house near the water with money Delaney had set aside long before. The first few weeks felt surreal. No whispered conversations, no meeting under cover of darkness, no constant fear of being discovered, just the two of us figuring out what life together actually looked like. Delaney got a part-time job at a local art gallery, something she had always dreamed of but never dared to pursue. I took a consulting role with a small logistics startup nearby. It paid a fraction of what I'd made before, but I didn't care. We built a routine mornings drinking coffee on the porch, grocery trips, movie nights on the couch, the ordinary things most couples take for granted, but felt like pure gold to us. One night, as the sun set over the water, I looked at Delaney sitting beside me in a blanket, the breeze pulling strands of hair across her face. I took her hand. I have to ask, I said softly, what happens next? She smiled, leaned her head against my shoulder, and whispered the words I'd never forget. Anything we want. We stayed like that for a long time, watching the last colors of the sunset fade into the sea. Today, over a year later, we're still here. We've built a life that's ours. We're talking seriously about starting a family. We're not perfect. There have been adjustments, tough conversations, and moments of doubt. But every day I wake up next to Delaney, I know I made the right choice. No secrets, no pretending, just real messy, beautiful love. The chapter that began with a whispered question at a holiday party became the story neither of us knew we needed. This is where our story ends and our life truly begins. Sawyer and Delaney's story delivers a powerful lesson about the courage to choose authenticity over a life of pretense, even when it means risking everything. Delaney's decision to break free from a hollow marriage and Sawyer's choice to abandon a promising career for love teach us that true fulfillment comes from embracing what makes us feel alive, no matter the cost. Their journey shows that love, when rooted in mutual respect and honesty, can transcend societal expectations and personal fears. Sawyer's willingness to step into the unknown with Delaney, despite the professional and social consequences, reminds us that the greatest risks often lead to the most rewarding lives. This story urges us to listen to our hearts, to recognize when we're merely existing rather than living, and to have the bravery to chase what truly matters. Delaney's vulnerability and Sawyer's steadfast support highlight the beauty of seeing and being seen for who we truly are. It's a call to prioritize genuine connection over comfort and to build a life that reflects our deepest desires, even if it defies convention. What resonated with you in Sawyer and Delaney's bold leap for love? Have you ever faced a moment where you chose your truth over security? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your stories. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell to join our community of heartfelt narratives. Let's keep exploring life's transformative lessons together.